Office Space wasn't just a cult classic. It was a corporate exorcism, a rage fantasy wrapped in beige walls, printer smoke, and passive-aggressive memos disguised as policy. But behind the flair and the TPS reports, it nearly got buried in its own boredom. Before casting even began, one unlikely name kept coming up. The studio pushed for a star, but not the one they landed on. And one scene hit too close to home. It actually changed a real restaurant chain. These are 20 weird facts about Office Space, and hidden deep in its cubicle chaos, a film that real CEOs started quoting for reasons that would have made the characters quit. Some revolutions start with fire. This one started with paperwork. Number 1. It was called Office Space. And the moment that name hit the table, the studio winced. Too bland, too boring, too close to a fax machine manual. Executives at Fox tried everything to change it. They pitched new names, more exciting ones. But Mike Judge wouldn't budge, because the title was the joke. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't clever, it was soul-sucking, forgettable, beige, just like the offices it was meant to skewer. But Fox didn't get it. They wanted something about Mary again. Loud, marketable, with a big studio push. Instead, they got a mumbling guy with a stapler, so they pulled back. They slashed the ad budget, canceled press screenings. Some insiders even claimed the studio buried the film on purpose, out of spite. For Mike Judge, it felt like sabotage. But for the film, it was poetic. Because Office Space wasn't just about corporate mediocrity, it was a victim of it. And the studio that tried to kill it accidentally became part of the joke. Number 2. Hair gel and a zipper gag. In 1998, There's Something About Mary blew the roof off the box office. It was crude, chaotic, and it made a lot of money. So Fox did what studios always do. They chased the chaos. Executives scrambled to find the next big gross-out comedy. And someone, deep in a boardroom stack, remembered a weird little cartoon. A guy with glasses who mumbled about his stapler. That cartoon, Milton. Created by Mike Judge for MTV's Liquid Television. They figured, hey, if hair gel jokes can sell, maybe this guy could too. Mike Judge wasn't so sure. He never meant for Office Space to be loud. It was dry, quiet, kind of depressing, and stretched from a 90-second cartoon into a full movie. It felt like a reach, but Fox didn't care. Mary made millions, and anything that smelled like irreverence got a green light. So Milton got his shot, not because the studio believed in workplace satire, but because gross-out comedy had opened a side door, and somehow a quiet office rebellion slipped through. Number 3. He was quiet, obsessive, and completely real. Before he was a cartoon, before he was a mumbling legend, Milton was just a guy Mike Judge worked with in real life. Same monotone voice, same hunched over shoulders, same eerie fixation on a red swingline stapler. Judge couldn't get him out of his head, so he drew him. A crude animation, just a few frames of a sad man losing his desk, losing his voice, and finally, snapping. It aired in 1991 on MTV's Liquid Television, a bizarre late-night showcase of weird animation and future cult classics. Milton was small, background noise, but something about him stuck. So much so that Saturday Night Live picked him up. Again and again, Milton showed up, ignored, pushed around, and somehow never gone. By the time Office Space was greenlit, Milton had already survived a decade of corporate abuse on cable. And when Stephen Root finally brought him to life, stapler in hand, he didn't just play a character. He became the ghost of every forgotten employee who was there all along, whispering in the background, waiting for his cake, and ready to burn it all down. Number 4. Before cubicles, before staplers, before soul-sucking corporate meetings, there was Bartleby. Not a movie, not a sitcom, but a short story by Herman Melville. In 1853, Melville published Bartleby, the Scrivener, the tale of a quiet office worker who one day simply stops. No big protest, no explosion, just 5 words. I would prefer not to. He doesn't want to copy documents, doesn't want to move desks, doesn't want to play the game anymore. 2 centuries later, Peter Gibbons walks into work, and after one strange hypnosis session, he doesn't quit either. He just stops caring, stops pretending, stops being afraid of saying no. Mike Judge never cited Bartleby, but literary critics couldn't ignore the echo. Same dead-end routine, same quiet rebellion, same eerie sense that opting out, without violence, is the scariest move of all. 2 stories, written worlds apart, but staring down the same enemy, the system, and the people it slowly eats alive. Number 5. Long before the red stapler, long before the flare, there was just a script and a quiet kind of rage. Mike Judge was hunting for something specific. Not charm, not star power, just that deadpan burnout energy, the kind that simmers under fluorescent lights. And one name kept floating to the top: Louis C.K. Back then, Louis wasn't famous. He was a stand-up comic with sharp writing credits and a face made for dry disappointment. On paper, it made sense. Louis had that slow fuse, that clenched smile, that "I've already quit in my head" delivery. But something didn't click. Judge later said he wanted it to work. But when it came to delivering the kind of everyman exhaustion the role demanded, Louis still felt like he was performing. Then came Ron Livingston. No sparkle, no ego, just a guy who looked like he belonged in a cubicle. He wasn't acting tired. He was tired, and that was it. Judge didn't need a comedian. He needed a mirror, and Ron gave him one. Quiet, frustrated, honest. Not a punchline, not a rebel, just Peter, the guy who finally decided he wasn't gonna go to work anymore. Number 6. The glasses, the suspenders, the mug. Bill Lumbergh was already annoying, but the voice, that soul-killing passive-aggressive drone that somehow made K feel like a threat, that was pure Gary Cole. He based it on an old boss and started doing the voice between takes to crack up the crew. But when Mike Judge heard it, he didn't laugh. He said, "That's it." So Cole leaned in, slower, flatter, more unbearable. What started as a joke became the most quietly terrifying villain in office comedy history. Number 7. That mullet, real. The sleeveless flannel, real. And that thick, drawl-heavy accent, straight from Diedrich Bader's childhood neighbor in Texas. He wasn't just playing Lawrence. He knew Lawrence, the kind of guy who could talk plumbing, beer, and conspiracy theories in the same breath. Bader said he didn't have to invent anything. He just listened. And when that neighbor saw the movie, he didn't get mad. He got flattered because for once, Hollywood didn't laugh at him. It laughed with him. Number 8. Stephen Root was bombing the audition. Too loud, too clear, too normal. Milton was supposed to be invisible, a mumbling shadow in the corner of the frame, but Root couldn't find him. And the studio? They were ready to move on. Then, out of desperation, Root hunched over. He shifted his weight, tilted his head downward like he was talking to the floor, not the people. And suddenly, Milton was there, voice included. Out came that quiet, breathy complaint, half whispered, half swallowed.
Yeah, I believe you have my stapler.
Judge leaned forward. The casting director laughed. And just like that, the part was his. Stephen Root later said the posture created the voice. He didn't act Milton. He folded into him. And that tiny, hunched man would go on to steal the entire movie without ever raising his voice. Number 9. The cast was locked. Filming had already started, and then the studio stepped in. Add someone famous. Add sex appeal. Mike Judge didn't want it. Office space was never meant to be shiny. It was cubicles, fluorescent lights, beige sadness. But Fox wasn't budging, so Judge wrote in a love interest, and they brought in Jennifer Aniston. At the time, she was one of the biggest names on TV. Friends was everywhere, but she was tired of always playing the pretty one. No designer outfits, no studio lighting, no romantic slow-mo, just a polyester uniform and 15 pieces of flair. And that's exactly why she said yes. Aniston saw what most people didn't. A chance to be messy, real, invisible on purpose. She embraced it. Bad restaurant jokes, awkward silences, no makeup glam squad in sight. It wasn't the role people expected her to take, but for Aniston, it was a quiet rebellion, and somehow, the weirdest role she ever loved. Number 10. Those desks, salvaged. Those dividers, scavenged. The production didn't build a set. They raided failed office buildings in Dallas. Judge wanted it to feel real, not designed, drained. Every carpet stain, every dead plant, every chair that leaned just a little too far back came from a place where someone once actually worked. And when the actors walked in, they didn't need to act tired. The air already smelled like coffee breath and broken dreams. It was more than a set. It was a graveyard. Number 11. It wasn't just funny, it was therapy. Mike Judge had worked in offices. He knew the rage, the helpless rage, of paper jams, blinking lights, and error codes that made no sense. So when it came time to shoot that iconic printer beatdown, he gave the actors one direction: pretend this thing ruined your life. They didn't need to pretend. They dragged it into a field, put on some Ghetto Boys, and unleashed every suppressed 9-to-5 meltdown they'd ever had. No stunt props, no reset button, just real weapons, and one real printer that had no idea what was coming. Number 12. He was ready, script in hand, character locked, camera rolling. Orlando Jones, one of the sharpest, fastest comics of the 90s, had officially joined Office Space. His role, a sarcastic, over-it office drone. Dry, brilliant, unforgettable. The kind of guy who could have stolen every scene. But somewhere between the rewrites and the edit room, he vanished. In the final cut, he's not at work. He's at Peter's apartment, selling magazines. For a single line, that's it. No setup, no payoff. Just a knock, a pitch, and silence. He still made the credits, but his performance? Buried in a film about people being erased. And somehow, that made the irony even louder. Number 13. Originally, it wasn't supposed to work. The hypnosis bit, just a gag. Peter would daydream, snap out of it, and go back to life as usual. But something happened in test screenings. Audiences didn't laugh at the idea of him getting stuck. They loved it. They leaned in. They wanted it to be real. So Mike Judge changed everything. The dream became canon. The stuck in a trance storyline wasn't just funnier. It gave the movie its whole identity. A guy who stopped caring. For real? That's not a daydream. That's every office worker's fantasies. Number 14. It sounds made up. TPS reports, cover sheets, passive-aggressive reminders. But they weren't a joke. Not at first. Mike Judge used to work as an engineer in Silicon Valley. Endless memos, endless meetings, endless nothing. And in the middle of it all, one real form, with one real cover sheet. That kept getting forgotten. So when he wrote Office Space, he didn't create TPS reports. He remembered them, a 3-letter punchline that every cubicle survivor instantly recognized. Because nothing screams corporate soul death, like someone asking if you got the memo. Number 15. That cherry red swing line? It's legendary now, but here's the secret. It didn't exist. In the original script, it was just a stapler, nothing special, but Mike Judge wanted it to pop. So the props team spray painted a basic black swing line, fire engine red, and suddenly, it wasn't just a stapler. It was Milton's heart, his soul, his last shred of power. Audiences locked onto it, and after the movie blew up on DVD, Swingline started getting hundreds of calls asking for a red version. There wasn't one, so they made one. Because when the stapler becomes the hero, you don't fight it, you sell it. Number 16. It started as a throwaway gag, a fake restaurant, a few tacky buttons, and a manager obsessed with flair. But someone was watching, someone in charge. In Office Space, Jennifer Aniston's character worked at Tchotchkes, a parody of TGI Fridays. Her manager didn't care about effort. He wanted flair, colorful buttons, funny slogans, all worn with a fake smile. The message was brutal. Corporate joy wasn't real, it was enforced. And in 2005, the real TGI Fridays made a quiet move. No announcement, no press release. They phased out all flair from their uniforms. Gone. Just like that. Years later, one of Mike Judge's assistant directors visited a Fridays and asked a server why. The employee didn't know who he was, but they answered plainly, because of that movie Office Space. A joke written in frustration had dismantled an actual company's dress code, all because someone finally said out loud. Number 17. He was just supposed to be the punchline, Brian, the overly peppy waiter drowning in flair. But when the DVD re-release came out, Brian came back, not as a character, but as a button. One of the collectible pins included in the DVD's box of flair had his actual face on it. Actor Todd Duffy wasn't laughing. He sued the studio for false endorsement, claiming they used his image without permission. A waiter character turned into literal merch without asking. But the court wasn't buying it. The case was dismissed, and the flair still floating around on eBay. Turns out, not even the happiest waiter on earth can win a fight against 15 pieces of corporate nostalgia. Number 18. When Office Space hit theaters in 1999, it barely made a sound. No viral buzz, no red carpet hype, just a quiet February release, buried under bigger studio comedies. It earned under $13 million. Critics liked it, but audiences stayed away. Mike Judge thought he'd failed, but something strange happened. The DVD release, quietly packaged, barely promoted, started vanishing from store shelves. College kids, tech workers, baristas, and burnout bosses. They weren't just watching it, they were quoting it, living it, passing it around like a secret language. The cult didn't grow overnight. It spread, cubicle to cubicle, dorm to dorm, job to job. By the early 2000s, Office Space was being called the VHS of the decade. A movie nobody saw in theaters had become the film everyone in the real working world could relate to. And Mike Judge? He stopped thinking it was a failure because it had found its audience, right where it was meant to be, not in theaters, but in the break room. Number 19. The DVD sales were exploding, the cult buzz was real, and the studio had just one question. What if we made it weekly? They wanted an Office Space sitcom, low budget, easy laughs, new temp every episode, new crisis by the copier, and Mike Judge didn't even blink. He turned it down, flat. To him, Office Space wasn't just a gag machine. It was personal, a quiet rebellion against soul-crushing jobs and fake smiles. He knew what the studio didn't. Once you turn the absurdity into a formula, you lose what made it sting. The movie wasn't just about cubicles, it was about getting out, and Judge wasn't about to chain it to a time slot. Number 20. Peter Gibbons got everything he wanted. He escaped the cubicle, left the khakis behind, found peace in manual labor and dirt under his nails. It should have felt like victory, but for Mike Judge, it didn't. Years after the film's cult explosion, Judge admitted something quietly in interviews. He wished he'd ended it differently, not because Peter's arc didn't land, but because it felt too tidy. Judge always meant for Office Space to be a rebellion, not a resolution. Peter becoming a construction worker? It solved the stress, not the system. The dream wasn't supposed to be less corporate. It was supposed to be more human. In Judge's mind, Peter didn't need a new job. He needed freedom. He needed purpose. And most of all, he needed to stop running from himself. But sometimes the hardest part of satire is when the joke ends too early. Bonus fact: it was meant to be a warning, a film about burnout, meaningless work, systemic rot. But in boardrooms across America, CEOs were loving it. Not ironically, not critically. They quoted it, gifted it, used it as icebreakers during meetings. One exec even told Mike Judge, "It's one of my favorite comedies. We have that guy at our office too." Judge just blinked because the joke wasn't about the system. The joke was the system. And it turns out, the system didn't just laugh. It branded it on a coffee mug and called it Monday Motivation. Office Space didn't scream. It didn't explode. It mumbled its way into legend. A quiet, bitter little film about fluorescent lighting, emotional suffocation, and the rebellion hiding behind every sigh. It gave us Milton. It gave us flair. But more than that, it gave every stuck, overworked, under-acknowledged human a reason to whisper, "I'd prefer not to." If this one ever made you feel seen, even just a little, drop a comment. Tell us what cult classic we should clock in for next. Because not all revolutions need noise. Some just need a red stapler.